when we see clinicians and practices doing the work that they love to do, that they went to school to do, that they're continually striving to do, and doing it at levels that make them happy in an environment that they love, with a team that also loves it, loves working for them, they love working with that team. That's what growth in dentistry looks like to me.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? I'm Steve Jensen, a dated dental nerd and your host.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Steve Jensen, your host of the Growth in Dentistry podcast, and thank you for joining us today. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Dental Intelligence, for bringing great content week after week and helping make sure that this podcast and this information gets out to the industry. Now, today, before I jump into introducing our guest, we always offer something to listeners. So if you come and check out Dental Intel, they're giving out a $50 gift card if you'll just come take a look at the software. If it's been a while since you looked at it, there's been lots of innovation where we've added on insurance claims processing and phones and a lot of things that a lot of people don't know about. So if it's been a while, come check it out. Like I said, they'll give you $50 and I'll leave that. The link will be in the show notes. Now, without any further ado, I am super excited to introduce you to our guest today, Geri Gottlieb. Now, Geri, you won't believe this because she still looks like she's only 31 years old, but she has been in the dental industry for 31 years and she has done everything. So I met Geri, probably almost 5 years ago through Seattle Study Club, I think is where we met. And she's heavily involved there. If you're familiar with them, a world-renowned place to come and learn more about what's the term? Geri, correct?
Interdisciplinary.
That's the word, interdisciplinary dentistry, and really exceptional clinical education. And Geri's heavily involved there in not just clinically, how do we do this, but she realizes that it's bigger than just the clinical skill, right? Like you actually have to be able to work with patients and manage a team. And so I'm excited to learn from some of her expertise today. A couple other things about Geri. So she has worked as an assistant all the way through practice ownership. She also started, before this, she was a consultant on her own, but for a different firm, but she started her consulting firm, GG Practice Coaching, back in 2019. So she's been doing this for 4 years on her own, having a lot of success. And let me just tell you this last thing, what got her on this podcast. Now we're several episodes into this, but earlier this year, I did a research study and I just wanted to analyze of all the 150 plus consultants that work with DI, who is moving the needle consistently across all of their clients in key metrics. And what I was really impressed with Geri on is there were a handful of really exceptional outcomes that were happening in the business. So both business outcomes as well as clinical outcomes. Those things include being top performing practices in annual patient value. So it means patients are saying yes to treatment. So her case numbers are really good. And then I also see in the pre-appointment side, so retention is good with her practices. So those typically speak to a patient experience. So anyway, we're going to dive into that today. Like, what is Geri teaching that is helping get consistent, really great outcomes for the patients, for the business, and then I'm going to assume probably the team as well, Geri. So with that, welcome to the show. And I'm just going to dive in, Geri. Like, do you have any ideas and on like what's actually causing that? Why are the practices you're working with getting such great outcomes? And let's learn from you today.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for the fun and kind welcome and introduction, Stephen. I totally appreciate it. I'm super excited to be here, especially for the reasons that you brought me here today. It was super fun to get that call from you saying, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you about these metrics. I've been doing a study and I want to know what's going on. And I'm going to flip it just a little bit. Great. Because you asked me, why do you think this is? Why are your clients in the top, 10% of the nation on most of these levers, right? Most of these key metrics. And I said, why do you think? Why do you think it is? And so before I answer that, I'm going to ask you, what are some of the reasons you think that it is, or that we've discussed that you think that it is?
Yeah, and in my mind, like I think so many of those numbers, and I'll share this too, and I think I've said this before, but listeners, I'll get feedback and they're like, well, I just want that like magic bullet. Like surely the doctors are saying something, one special line, and that's what's doing it. But I think I'll repeat this phrase that trust is earned in drops and it's lost in buckets. And so practices I have found that have really thought through what's the experience my team members are having, because what team members feel, whether it's showing on their face or not, comes through to patients. Like it just does. People, when we're around each other, we feel each other's energy. It's a reality of life. So what's happening in the business from like a management perspective absolutely is having an impact. I would imagine that the patients, like what are they feeling when they're in the business, is having an impact on that. Like if the patient trusts the clinician, and that probably comes down to like what the whole team's doing, what technologies they're using to present treatment or talk about treatment, I'm sure. I think, Geri, you typically work with more advanced dentists, right? Like I mentioned that connection to Seattle Study Club, like typically like higher clinical thinking dentists that wanted to like really make sure they're offering the best solutions to clients. And then I also imagine there's probably some practical business things, right? Like some like basic principles of like, hey, we got to operate a business well to do that. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Probably something in those buckets that you're teaching.
Right, absolutely. So I think number one, you are right. We are blessed to get to work with practitioners who think on a different level. They want to do better. They want to work more collaboratively. They look at the whole picture. They're not just hyper focused on one thing, either clinically and or from the business side. I'm going to say these are probably the three things that might be making the biggest difference for the GG practice coaching clients and why our metrics look like they do. One, and I know people talk about this, but I don't think anybody talks about it and or coaches it quite like we do. We focus heavy first on the vision and the values of the practice. The doctor, how do you want to practice? What is your vision? What is it supposed to look like, feel like, smell like, taste like? Because it's different. I could line up 20 of you. It's different for all 20, right? So first that, and then let's get really, really clear. What is that supposed to look like? What is, Dr. So-and-so practice supposed to look and feel like? If you could have it be any way, that's number one. Then I break it down with them of, okay, if that's how it's supposed to look and feel, and that's what the patients are supposed to experience, the team is supposed to experience, what you as the provider want to experience every day, what behavior has to be in place every single day? What are the 1, 2, 3 to 5 key values that you hold that have to be in place to make that vision a reality? Then we work on the processes, the systems, the SOP, whatever you want to call it. And every single thing that we do, I take them back to that vision and core values all the time. So if they start to say, well, we need to get more new patients. All right, do we? Right? What did you just tell me in your vision? You want to be an intimate boutique business with blah, whatever it is, I tie it back. Is what we're doing or what we're wanting to do is the patient experience, the team experience in alignment with your vision and the values that you say are so important.
I love the way you broke that down. Oh, keep going.
No, go ahead.
Okay, sweet. I had this thought, so I'll jump in here. On the mission and values, let's kind of start there. I think sometimes people, myself included, sometimes I can get like lost in that feeling kind of fluffy. But let me say this, like one of the things that I come to all the time, like I like cars. And the honest truth is every car company is different, right? Like Ford is not trying to be Mercedes-Benz. Like they're just not. To your point, they feel different. It smells different. Their like buyer is different. Even their dealerships are different, and they can't be each other. Otherwise they will fail, and they can't be everything to everyone. Otherwise they fail, right? So I think that's one thing, just to like note, like if you're someone that struggles with this like mission, vision, value stuff, like maybe find some other industry where you can see that value of that, where you're like, I appreciate that they are specialized for me and the way they serve me, and that might help you wrap your mind around the way you want to do dentistry, right? I think that's a good
100%. And I just drill down on it. Like I drive my clients crazy for the first at least 90 days. But once we're clear.
But yeah, can I ask you a question on that? Because my other question was like, how easy do you see doctors and teams? Like, is it difficult for them to identify like, what do I want?
Yes.
Okay. And then
because I think
how do you know what you want for sure?
Well,
you know, because some people have this dream of like, you know, I want to be more like giving. So like there's this whole industry of like mobile dentistry, and that's like a completely different game, right? Like visualizing. By the way, I like the way you said it. Like I think everything gets created like visually, mentally, spiritually. What do you want to say it before it gets created physically? Like we have to start there. We have to like picture it and try to experience it before we can like really execute well. And so like that's so different than, you know, a dentist who's like, I want it to feel like a spa, where like you come in and I'm, you know, doing some more advanced stuff. Maybe I'm doing Botox. That's a thing I've seen pop up in dentistry, where like they're just different. And so like, how do you get people to understand, like advice for doctors and teams that are like trying to get an identity on their business? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, you can imagine for our clinicians, this is super hard. It's super like, what? But if I can even get them to just write down some detailed, just or even non-detailed, but you can give me bullet pointed things that are important to you, things that you like to do, things that you don't like to do, things that, and I think here's the big thing. I'm going to use the word permission. I don't know if anybody asks clinicians, or at least the way I ask my clients, and give them permission to truly just say whatever. I feel like sometimes they think they have to have a certain type of practice, and they have to practice dentistry a certain type of way. And I say, but what if you don't? What would it look like? And then when they start to articulate it, just think about you, even your love for cars. You start to think about the kind of car, and you start to imagine it. And maybe you keep that to yourself for a long time and never do anything about it. But maybe you start to talk about it and you start to see it down on paper. Now you start to be able to see it, want it. You're like, now I can actually feel myself driving that car. I can actually picture myself, you know, for the doctors, it's stepping into their practice and it looks a certain way, and people are behaving a certain way, and they have time to go out and do mobile dentistry if that's what is on their heart, right? So I just drill it down. I don't make them write fluffy stuff because I know most of them can't. I can take it. I can take even just bullet points and make it into something that is going to inspire or help the team, and to keep a focus on where we're going. So I think it's just about giving them permission. I just give them permission to dream about whatever it is, even if they weren't told they could do that in dental school, or they haven't been told they could do that out in the real world. Like, we have so many options of how we want to practice our craft. Like, what if we could just design it the way you wanted it? Right? Then let's put the processes in place that support that. So we got to have the SOPs. We have to have systems in place. We have to ensure, if we want to be Mercedes-Benz, we're going to attract, you said this, the buyer is different. Right? So if I'm a Mercedes-Benz of practices, or I'm a Ford F-150 of practices, I'm going to attract those sorts of buyers. And then what's the language that those buyers speak? What's going to resonate with them that moves them towards health, moves them towards buying the treatment that is needed and prescribed for them? That from the languaging to the systems. Like, and then again, if we start to go off track, I say, but hold on a second. You said, is it not true that you want it to look like this? Is that going to get us there? And then I invite the team to that. like, what do you hear when you hear these things, team? What do you hear when the doctor says, I want it to be, the Ford F-150? Okay, now I get it. Now I know what we're supposed to be looking towards. I've been trying to be Mercedes-Benz. No. And then it is, I think, giving them, this is where the metrics come in. This is where I love dental intelligence so much. And the fact that we really focus not on the metrics in a punitive way, but in a celebratory way. And look how well we're doing at being Ford F-150, right? Not, oh, hey, you're good over here, but you're not Mercedes. Well, they're not, but they're not trying to be Mercedes, and we're not gonna talk about metrics that Mercedes would have, right? So then we take the metrics and we're educating, and we are celebrating and challenging, right? So when the metrics aren't like, okay, well, tell me what's going on. Are we not wearing, I don't know what like, if you're a Ford F-150 buyer, you're wearing a belt buckle and cowboy boots or something. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like exactly, but are we meeting that expectation for the patients? Is the team aligned around that? Where do we need to look at those pieces? So I involve the team when it comes to the SOPs and the metrics, because honestly, the business owner gets to set the vision. Right? I'm not going to leave my vision and what's important to me to the rest of my team, even though I love and trust my team. It's my business. Now they're invited to that table and they get to contribute to that. But when it comes to the systems and when it comes to the metrics, like, how well are we doing at living out that vision that you all say you want to be a part of? And I let them have say and input there, and own the metrics that are telling them how well they're doing at being Mercedes or Ford.
Now, Geri, I'm going to ask you, can we maybe talk through like an example? So like let's start with like a mission vision, and then like kind of talk through maybe some examples on the next couple of steps. Like in my mind, I'm picturing, I like what you said, by the way, like I'm like picturing different types of dentists. And people, I'll say this, we have BS filters. Like if someone's trying to be something that they're not, then like our BS filter starts, like sirens like go off. And we're like, yeah, something's like off here with this person.
Correct.
Where like there's elements of that. So like one, it could be, like when someone's envisioning their practice, I'm imagining, like you gave the example of like a Ford F-150 dentist who's like maybe a little more like cowboy, and like their dress standard is going to be a certain way. Doesn't mean that their dentistry has to be poor or less than anyone else, but like the whole feeling of the business. So like there's probably some like experiential vision that you have, and then also like a clinical vision, right? And sometimes those things, hopefully there's always like a good clinical vision for the practice, but the clinical vision sometimes can be, I want to do like true just general dentistry, and sometimes I want to do more advanced, and I want to like move into like that like super GP. I think that's a pretty common like accepted idea, where I want to get more advanced in this stuff. So what are some of the dentists you work with? Do you mind giving some examples? Like, hey, here's like an example. This is kind of the vision we came up with, and then some of the experiential and clinical things we put in place, and then maybe some of the metrics. I think it could be interesting for listeners to like relate directly with something, like an example or a story maybe. I'm putting you on the spot just so the listeners.
You did. So many, because they're all so very different. But so we have a newer client, younger dentist. He bought a legacy practice in Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas. And drilling down on this with him was challenging too, because the things that attracted him to that practice were some of the ways that other practitioner practiced more holistically, and a lot of TMJ and sleep, and biomimetics. Is that the right word? Biomimetics. But he said, but how do I make it mine? Like he kept using the word signature. How do I put my signature on this practice? And I said, whoa, there's your name right there. Signature Dental of Lawrence and Dr. So-and-so. And And it was from there then that was born the, what do you want to do? What parts of dentistry do you want to do? And what parts do you not want to? If you never had to do another TMJ impression in your life, like, would that be like, oh, yes. If you never had to do a composite, if you only did, quadrant dentistry, whatever it is, and then we take it and go, okay. So for example, for him, there's a couple things he doesn't want to do in his practice. He's not going to do just sort of everyday, the needed everyday bread and butter type treatment. He's not going to do endo. He's not going to do. So great. How then do we build systems and put systems in place to build referral relationships? Who are you going to work with? Who's going to align with your values enough that you're going to send your signature patients to somewhere else, right? And so then it's about putting systems in place to build those relationships if we're going to refer things out, which is where it comes back to sometimes the metrics. We can pull up the metrics in dental intel and say to somebody, what's up with your perio numbers? And it's like, well, hold on a second. My vision was to actually outsource all perio.
Yeah, and work closely with the periodontist.
And work totally closely with the periodontist that I align with. Great. Okay, well, we don't need to worry about that anymore. Right? But we will measure how well are we doing at sending those patients out and getting them back and proceeding on with other care that they need.
Yep.
Okay, so now we just track it differently. Is that sort of what you were?
Yeah, that's great.
Right. Okay. And so, so we just did this. So then when it comes down to diving into things like dental intelligence and the metrics of how are we going to show if we're being signature dental, and how are we going to, what are the things that are going to be important to us? I always start with asking everybody on the team, why are you here? What do you do? And so why and how, or why and what? And then I ask them, how would we know? How would you know? Aside from me just saying, good job, Stephen. How would you know if you're doing a really good job of that thing that you said was important to you? I don't know. Well, we just went through dental intelligence. Do you think there's anything in here that could tell you if you're leading people towards health? I get that one. I want people to, in the signature dental, I want them, since we're holistic, I want them to, move forward and be healthier. How would we know? Oh, case acceptance. Oh, this. Yeah, we can affect those, right? And even if it's me on the admin team, or if it's one of the assistants, if that's their why and what they're doing in the practice, then what are some of the metrics we could be looking at and be responsible for or share that would tell us how well we're doing that? Am I missing anything?
No, I'm just letting you finish talking because I'm enjoying every minute of it. If I'm a listener, I love, Geri, just the way that you've made it so simple, like starting with mission, vision, values, and then what behaviors have to exist in order for those things to be manifested into my business? Yeah. And then how are we going to measure whether or not we're actually getting this vision that we want to have happen, right? The excellence in clinical care and patient experience, whatever the thing that you're looking for, how are we going to measure that? And then let's put some systems and controls in place so that team members can know if they're like excellent and they're like achieving our mission or vision and values, or if we aren't, and then like make adjustments. Like it's such a easy, thoughtful way to think about it. And so if I was like listening, then I would go like write all of this stuff down myself. Now we're coming up on time. So I'm going to ask you the question we always ask. And then I imagine if you're listening, you're probably thinking, man, like I would love to talk with Geri more. So Geri, can we put like contact information in the show notes?
Would love it. Absolutely. Email, website.
Website is ggpracticecoaching.com. So, and then we'll throw them in the show notes, right? Like, so please reach out to Geri. Geri, I'm going to ask you the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? And then we'll finish up.
I think, what does growth in dentistry mean to me? So many things, Stephen, but I think when we see clinicians and practices doing the work that they love to do, that they went to school to do, that they're continually striving to do, and doing it at levels that make them happy in an environment that they love, with a team that also loves it, loves working for them. They love working with that team. That's what growth in dentistry looks like to me.
What a wonderful, wonderful answer. I love that. Well, if that doesn't make you want to reach out to her, I don't know what will. I'm just kidding. Oh, I'll mention this too. One thing that I know about Geri that she does, which is so cool, anyone that's interested in working with her on the consulting side, she always does a complimentary call right out of the gates. It's important to her to make sure that she can give and drive the value for you. So like I said, the email and website will be in the show notes. Geri also mentioned to me beforehand, she's doing a bunch of courses in 2024. So if you're also interested in courses that she has coming up this next year, then shoot an email to the email in the show notes, and they'll send you a flyer that has all of the courses that she's got scheduled to come in and spend more time.
Very exciting.
It's hard to get everything captured in a 20-minute podcast episode. So if you want to come and sit down and spend some real time with Geri, that's another great option. I would definitely take her up on that.
And we'd be happy to come back to the podcast anytime, have Kim and our newest team member, Tiffany. I think they just have a lot to bring to the table too when it comes around, especially with the systems and implementation when we get to those pieces.
Yeah, I would definitely love to dive into some systems and implementation. People are always like begging for that. Like, will you just like teach me some like operational hacks on like, how do I piece the business together so that it's a well-oiled machine? So let's definitely get that done. Well, thank you, Geri, for joining us today.
You're
for the content you shared. And to all of our guests, thanks again for joining. This has been a Growth in Dentistry podcast where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? And as always, keep growing.